It's mine now. I had it signed into my name, where it belongs. My sister said that on the front porch of our grandmother's lake cabin, on Father's Day, with a paper plate of barbecue in one hand. For 9 years, I had paid the property taxes on that cabin. Every January, in front of the whole family, a check everyone watched me write. Tansy had paid nothing, and she was smiling when she told the room the cabin was hers. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I set down my glass and I told her congratulations. I meant it the way you mean it when you already know something the other person doesn't. Because 6 weeks earlier, our grandmother's lawyer had called me about a folder, and in 20 minutes, that same lawyer would walk up these porch steps, open it, and ask a single question that would empty the smile off my sister's face. She thought she had won the cabin. She had no idea what she'd actually signed. I'm Eira, 34, a hospice nurse, and the quietest person at that table was the only one Grandma ever trusted with the truth. Let me take you back to that morning, before the lawyer's car turned onto the gravel. The cabin sits on the north shoulder of Pelican Lake, 2 hours outside the city, down a gravel road that floods every April. My grandmother Opal bought it with my late grandfather in 1971. 3 rooms, a sleeping porch, a dock that needs a new board every spring. It is not a fortune. To anyone driving past, it's a small brown cabin with a tin roof and a hand-painted sign that says Whitcomb. To my family, it was the only thing left worth fighting over. By that Father's Day, Grandpa had been gone 11 years. Grandma Opal was 86, sharp as a fishhook, living in an assisted living apartment in town because her knees had finally quit. The cabin had been sitting half-empty for years. Someone had to keep it. Someone had to pay for it. That someone was me. I want to be clear about something because it matters later. There was nothing secret about what I did for that cabin. Every January, the county sent the property tax bill to Grandma's address, and Grandma's hands shook too much to write checks anymore. So I wrote them, at the kitchen table, out loud. Taxes are due, Grandma. I've got it. My father saw it. My sister saw it. My cousins saw it. Nobody offered to split it. Nobody thanked me either. It was just a thing Eira did, like wiping the counter or fixing the dock board. 9 years of that. 9 Januaries. I did the math once, sitting in my car in the county building parking lot. With the special assessment for the new road, the lakefront reevaluation, the penalty the year I paid late after a double shift, it came to a little over $31,000. $31,000 I had paid on a building I did not own, for a family that called me reliable, the way you'd call a wrench reliable. I never said the number out loud to anyone. Not because it was a secret, because saying it would have sounded like a bill, and I didn't want to be the person who sent my grandmother a bill. So when did the cabin become a war? It started the spring Grandma's knees gave out. That was the spring my sister came home. Tansy is 2 years younger than me and has spent her whole life being the one things happen for. When we were kids, she was the pretty one, the funny one, the one who cried easily and got held. I was the one who got told to help her. When our mother left, I was 9. Tansy was 7. Our father didn't pull us closer. He picked a favorite, and it was the daughter who reminded him least of the wife who'd gone. For 12 years, Tansy lived 3 states away, chasing a man, then chasing another man, then chasing a fresh start that always needed a wire transfer to launch. She missed Grandpa's funeral. She missed 9 of Grandma's birthdays. She came back the spring the knees went with a husband named Royce, a leased SUV, and a brand new tenderness for a grandmother she had not called in 4 years. I should have seen it then. The way she walked into Grandma's apartment and went straight to the window that looks toward the lake. The way she said, "We have to keep the cabin in the family no matter what." We. As if she'd ever paid $1 toward it. I want to be honest about my father, too, because he's part of this, and not in a simple way. My father, Garrett, is 71, a retired lineman, a man who climbed poles in ice storms for 30 years and never once told either of his daughters he was proud of her. He is not a monster. He is a frightened man who decided somewhere along the way that love was a finite thing, like firewood, and you had to ration it to the child who'd freeze without it. He chose Tansy. He's been choosing her so long it isn't a choice anymore. It's just the shape his hands fall into. When Tansy came home with her tenderness and her leased SUV, My father did what he always does. He believed her, and he started quietly to talk about making things fair. In my family, fair has only ever meant one thing: giving Tansy what she wants and asking me to understand. The first real shot came in May at Sunday dinner. We were at my father's house, the four of us plus Royce, eating pot roast off the good plates. Grandma wasn't there. Her knees kept her home. Tansy waited until the gravy was passed, and then she said it like she was talking about the weather. Daddy and I have been thinking. The cabin should come to me. I set my fork down. Come to you how? Grandma's not getting younger. Somebody needs to be on the deed. And let's be honest, Eira, you're never out there. You work all the time. You don't have kids to bring up there. It just makes more sense for it to belong to a real family. There it was, a real family. Tansy and Royce had been married 14 months. They had no children, but they had the word family the way some people have a coat, something to put on when they want to look warm. I asked the only question that mattered. Have you talked to Grandma about this? We don't want to upset her, my father said. She's old. These things should be handled by us. By us. Meaning by them. Around me. The way everything in this family had always been handled. I looked at my father's face, at the way he wouldn't meet my eyes, and I understood that the plan was already moving. They weren't asking, they were informing. I didn't fight at that table. I have spent my whole life learning that fighting at the table is how you lose. I said, I think Grandma should have a say in what happens to Grandma's cabin. And I let the silence sit there, ugly, until Royce changed the subject to his golf game. But that night, driving home, my hands were steady on the wheel, and my mind was very quiet and very clear. Because here is what my sister and my father did not know. My father caught me in the driveway before I could leave that dinner. He'd followed me out, which he never does, and he stood by my car with his hands in his pockets and made his pitch in the low, reasonable voice he uses when he's about to ask you to give something up. Eira, be the bigger person here. He wouldn't look at me. Your sister's struggling. Royce can't hold a job. They need a place, something solid, something that's theirs. You've got your career, your savings, your whole steady life. What's a cabin to you? You'd barely notice. He finally met my eyes. Let her have this one thing. For me, as if every prior thing hadn't also been for him. I looked at my father, 71, and asking his solvent daughter to hand her struggling sister a cabin she didn't even own, and I understood that he genuinely believed this was fair. In his arithmetic, the one who has less should be given more, and the one who's steady should absorb the cost forever without complaint. It's not cruelty. It's a math problem he's been solving wrong for 34 years, always with me as the remainder. I hear you, Dad, I said, which is not yes. He took it as yes because he always takes my calm as agreement. That was his mistake, and he'd been making it my whole life. There was one person at that pot roast dinner who'd watched the whole thing with the same stillness I had, and that was my cousin Della. She'd come for the food and stayed for the warning signs. Della is Grandma's other granddaughter, my late aunt's girl, raised half at the cabin, the only cousin who ever offered to split a tax check with me. I always told her no. It wasn't her bill to carry, but she remembered every time I said it. Della called me before I'd even pulled into my own driveway. They're going to try something, she said. Did you hear Tansy? Should come to me. Not, should stay in the family. To me. I heard it. Eira, you need to talk to Grandma before they do. Whatever they're planning it for when you're not in the room. I told her I'd handle it. I didn't tell her how. Della didn't know about the trust. Nobody did but Grandma, Mr. Ardley, and me. And a promise is a promise even when it's lonely. But I let her think she was protecting me, because the truth is, that night it helped to have one person in the family on my side, even if she was guarding a wall she didn't know was already built. Just promise me one thing, Della said before she hung up. Don't let them do this to you quiet. You always go quiet. Quiet's how they win. I didn't tell her that quiet was exactly how I was going to win. I just said goodnight. What I didn't know, that night in my driveway, was that the cabin was only the first thing they were after, because here is what my sister and my father did not know. They did not know what Grandma had asked me to do 3 years before. In the fall of 2019, my grandmother called me to her apartment on a Tuesday. She had a pot of weak coffee and a tin of the lemon cookies she likes, and a man I'd never met sitting at her little table. Gray suit, kind eyes, a leather folder. His name was Mr. Ardley, and he was Grandma's attorney. "Eira," she said, "I'm not going to live forever, and I have watched this family long enough to know exactly what will happen to that cabin the day I'm gone. So I'm going to do something about it while my head still works." I thought she was going to ask me to be in the will. I told her she didn't have to do that. She waved her hand at me, annoyed. "Wills get fought," she said. "Wills get contested by people with leased cars and lawyers paid on hope. I don't want a fight. I want a wall." Mr. Ardley opened his folder, and in the next 40 minutes my grandmother explained to me, slowly, carefully, twice, because she wanted me to understand, that she was placing the lake cabin into a trust, a living trust, the Opal Whitcomb Family Trust. The cabin would no longer be owned by Opal Whitcomb the person. It would be owned by the trust. And while she lived, she would be the trust's beneficiary, with every right to use it, sell it, anything she liked. But the trust needed someone to manage it. A trustee. The person legally responsible for the property, the one whose signature actually moved it, the one the law would answer to. "That's you," Grandma said. "I'm naming you trustee, as of today." I want to be precise here because everything that happened on that porch turns on it. This was not a trick. It was not a hidden clause, not a secret weapon, not some movie contract where shares teleport into my name if someone insults me. It was the plainest, most ordinary thing a careful old woman can do with a lawyer. She put her cabin in a trust. She named her granddaughter to run it. She signed it in front of a notary on a Tuesday in October, ate 2 lemon cookies, and told me to keep my mouth shut about it because, in her words, "If your father knows, he'll worry it to death, and your sister will start measuring the curtains." So I kept my mouth shut for 3 years, through every Sunday dinner where they talked about the cabin like it was a pie they were dividing. I had signed nothing in secret and paid nothing in secret. Those January tax checks stayed right out in the open. The only thing I held quietly was a fact, that the cabin was already protected, already settled, already mine to steward, and that my sister could announce whatever she wanted on whatever porch she liked. She would be announcing it about a building she had no power over. If you're still here, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what state you're listening from. I like knowing who's out there at the lake with me. Now stay close because the part where they figured out what trustee means is the part I'd rewind to 100 times. Here's what I didn't know that October and didn't learn until much later. Grandma hadn't just set up the trust to keep the cabin safe from a fight. She'd set it up because she'd already caught Tansy once. I found this out in pieces, the way you find out anything true in my family. But the spine of it was this. 2 years before the trust, when Tansy still lived 3 states away, she had called Grandma in tears, said Royce's truck had been repossessed, said they were 1 bad week from the street, and Grandma, who loved that girl no matter how rarely she called, had wired her $4,000 from her savings on the promise it would come back by Christmas. It never came back, and worse, Grandma found out later there had been no repossession. There had been a trip to Cancun posted in photographs Tansy forgot her grandmother could see. A blue ocean, a drink with an umbrella, a caption that said, "Treat yourself." My grandmother never confronted her. That wasn't Grandma's way. Grandma's way was a gray suit and a leather folder and a wall built so quietly that the person it was built against wouldn't know it existed until they walked into it. So when my father started talking about making things fair and Tansy started saying real family, they thought they were moving pieces on an empty board. They didn't know the board had been locked 3 years earlier by an 83-year-old woman with shaking hands and a very long memory. The summer the cabin war went hot, I almost broke my promise to her. Twice. The first time was in June, the year before that Father's Day, when I drove out to the cabin and found the locks changed. I'd come up to fix the dock board like every June. My key didn't turn. A new deadbolt, brass, still shiny. There was a note taped to the door in Tansy's bubbly handwriting. "Hi." We're staying out here weekends now to keep an eye on the place. Text before you come so we don't overlap." I stood on my grandmother's porch, locked out of the building I'd paid the taxes on for 8 years, holding a dockboard under my arm, and I felt something I don't feel often. Not sadness. A cold, level fury, the kind that doesn't make your hands shake. It makes them very, very still. I walked the perimeter because that's what I do. I assess before I react. The dying teach you that. Through the window, I could see what they'd done inside. Grandpa's fishing rods were gone from the wall pegs, replaced by a framed print of a wine label. The afghan my grandmother crocheted over 3 winters had been folded into a basket and shoved under the bench like a rag. On the kitchen counter sat a stack of paint chips and a measuring tape. They weren't keeping an eye on the place. They were redecorating it. They were moving in on a building they had no right to, erasing my grandfather one wall hook at a time, and they'd been so sure it was theirs that they hadn't even waited for a signature. I stood there a long minute with my hand flat against the cold window glass, and I made myself a promise that wasn't loud and wasn't a threat. Just this. Every single thing they took down, I would one day put back. The rods, the afghan, the hand-painted sign. Not out of spite, out of inventory. I was the steady one. I keep track of what belongs where. I could have called Mr. Ardley right then. I could have told him a beneficiary's grandchild had changed the locks on trust property and watched the whole thing come down. The trustee, me, had every legal right to those keys. But I had given Grandma my word. Not until she said. So I texted my sister 3 words. "Got the new key?" She sent a thumbs-up emoji and never sent the key. I drove home with the dockboard still in my trunk. It rode around back there for a month, a little wooden reminder that I was being patient on purpose. But the locks were the small thing. The locks were a flag planted on a hill they didn't own. What scared me, and it takes a lot to scare me, I've sat with the dying, came 2 weeks later, and it had nothing to do with the cabin's walls. It started with a phone call from Grandma's assisted living facility. The director, a careful woman named Mrs. Pruitt, asked me to come in. I'm listed as Grandma's emergency contact and medical proxy, have been for years, since the knees, since I'm the nurse and the one who shows up. Mrs. Pruitt sat me down in her little office with the fake plant and the cold coffee, and she said something that made my stomach drop the way the gravel road drops in April. "Your sister came by Tuesday," she said. "She had paperwork. She wanted to be added as your grandmother's power of attorney, financial and medical both." I kept my face still. Did Grandma sign anything? That's why I called you. Mrs. Pruitt slid a photocopy across the desk. Your grandmother said she'd think about it, but your sister was very insistent. She told my staff that your grandmother's mind was slipping and that decisions needed to be made before it's too late. She used those words. I've spent 20 years around families, Eira. I know a setup when I hear one. I read the photocopy. A durable power of attorney form, Tansy's name in the blank, a notary line not yet filled. And I understood, sitting in that office with the fake plant, that the cabin had never been the real prize. The cabin was 3 rooms and a tin roof. Grandma had a paid-off house in town she'd been renting out, a modest portfolio my grandfather had built nickel by nickel, and a life insurance policy. If you control the person, you control all of it. Tansy hadn't come home for a cabin. She'd come home for power of attorney over a frail old woman, and the cabin was just the part she'd decided to do loud and in public, so it would look like love. "Mrs. Pruitt," I said, "if my sister comes back with that form, or any form, will you call me first?" "Already planned on it." She tapped the photocopy. "But you should know. She mentioned a doctor, said she could get an evaluation that would show your grandmother isn't competent. If she finds a doctor who'll sign that, this office can't stop her. You'll need more than my goodwill." I drove straight from the facility to Grandma's apartment. I didn't tell her about the wall. I never broke that part of my promise. But I told her what her grandchild had tried to do behind the front desk. And my grandmother, 86, listened to the whole thing with her hands folded, and at the end she said only one thing. "So she's not just after the cabin. She's after me." Grandma nodded slowly, like a fact settling into place. "Good. Now I know how far she'll go." She looked at me. "Call Mr. Ardley. Tell him I want a competency evaluation done. On my terms, by my doctor. On the record, dated. Before she finds a doctor of hers. I'm going to prove I'm sharp while I still can, and I'm going to make sure the date on that proof comes before any date she can buy. That was the day I understood my grandmother hadn't built one wall. She'd been building them her whole life, quietly, one careful Tuesday at a time, and the trust was only the one I knew about. I did try once to do it the honest way, to handle it like sisters instead of like strategists. I drove to the little rental house Tansy and Royce had taken in town, knocked on the door, and asked if we could talk. Just us. No lawyers, no grandma, no audience. She let me in. She made tea even, in the performance of hospitality she does so well. And for about 10 minutes I let myself hope. Tansy, I said, I know what you tried at Grandma's facility, the power of attorney, telling them her mind's slipping. I kept my voice level. Her mind is not slipping, you know that. So I'm asking you, as your sister, stop. Whatever you think you need, talk to me. Don't do it through her. She set down her tea, and the warmth went out of her face like a light switched off, and I saw, for just a second, the real Tansy underneath the white dress one. You don't get to lecture me about Grandma, she said. You've had her to yourself for years. The nurse, the proxy, the one she calls. You think I don't know what you're doing? You're positioning. You've always been positioning. And the second she's gone, you'll have arranged everything so it all flows to you, and I'll get a thank you card. She leaned forward. I'm just doing out loud what you've been doing quiet. At least I'm honest about wanting my share. I want to be fair to her because the outline of what she said wasn't entirely wrong, and that's what made it land. I was the one who'd been close to Grandma. I was the proxy, the nurse, the one she called. From where Tansy stood, 12 years away, written off, the screw-up. It probably did look like I'd spent those years quietly arranging the board. She couldn't see the wall, so she invented one shaped like me. I'm not positioning, Tansy, I said. I'm showing up. There's a difference, and the difference is who does the dishes after. Get out of my house, she said. So I did. I drove home having gained exactly nothing. No truce, no reset, no sister. If anything, I'd handed her ammunition. She now knew I knew about the POA, which only made her move faster to the public ambush. That was the closed door, the private clash where she won the round. And it taught me the thing I'd been avoiding for 34 years. You cannot reason someone out of a story they need to be true. Tansy needed me to be the schemer so she could be the wronged one. No teapot conversation was going to take that away from her. Only a folder could. The second time I almost broke was the night I learned what they were really planning. Royce, it turns out, talks when he drinks. We were at my cousin Della's 4th of July. Della's the one good apple, Grandma's other granddaughter, the one cousin who ever split a tax check offer with me even though I told her not to. Royce had been into the cooler since 2 o'clock, and around dusk he sat down next to me on the cooler lid and got confidential. You know what's smart about your sister? He said. She doesn't wait for things to fall in her lap. The cabin? We already talked to a guy. Quit claim deed. Your grandma signs over her interest. Boom, it's ours, clean. We're doing it on Father's Day. Big family moment. Garrett's idea, actually. Do it when everybody's watching so nobody makes a scene later. I kept my face very still. Grandma's agreed to sign? Royce waved his beer. She'll sign. She loves Tansy. We just gotta get the paper in front of her on the right day when she's happy and there's cake. That's the night I understood the whole shape of it. They were going to get my 86-year-old grandmother to sign a quitclaim deed at a Father's Day party in front of an audience, while she was tired and pleased and surrounded by people she didn't want to disappoint. Ambush by celebration. And here is the thing they could not have known, sitting on that cooler in the dark, so sure of their clean little plan. A quitclaim deed only transfers what the signer actually owns. My grandmother no longer owned the cabin. The trust did. She could sign a quitclaim deed to that cabin every day for a year, and it would transfer exactly nothing, because you cannot give away what is not yours to give. They were planning to ambush an old woman to get her signature on a piece of paper with no more legal force than a birthday card. I went home that night and I did break my promise. A little. I called Grandma. Not to tell her what I knew, to ask her one question. If somebody put a paper in front of you at the party, I said, and asked you to sign over the cabin to Tansy, would you? There was a long quiet on the line. Then my grandmother laughed, a dry little laugh like a door hinge. Let them bring their paper, she said. I've got a paper of my own, and mine has a notary's stamp on it. She paused. Call Mr. Ardley. Tell him I want him at the party. Tell him to bring the folder. 2 days before Father's Day, the competency evaluation came back. Grandma had insisted on it after the power of attorney stunt, and her own physician, a no-nonsense internist named Dr. Halverson, who'd known her 15 years, ran the whole battery. Memory, judgment, orientation, the works. I sat in the waiting room while they did it, and when Grandma came out, she had a piece of paper in her hand and a grim little satisfaction on her face. He says I'm sharper than half his 30-year-olds, she told me. It's dated, it's signed, it's notarized. Mr. Ardley has the original. She tucked the report into her purse like a woman tucking away a loaded thing. Now, if your sister buys herself a doctor, the dates won't line up. Mine comes first. A judge looks at 2 evaluations. He believes the one that came before the lawsuit, not the one ordered up to win it. I want to stop here because this is the part I'd want you to sit with if you're listening from your own kitchen, your own assisted living parking lot, your own family that's circling someone too old to circle back. Drop a comment and tell me, has someone in your family ever tried to declare an elder incompetent the second there was money in the room? I read every one of those because I learned something that summer I wish I'd known years earlier. The people who shout the loudest about loving someone are often the ones building a case that the person can't be trusted to make their own choices. Love doesn't try to take the pen. Love makes sure the pen still works. After the teapot conversation, Tansy stopped trying to win me and started trying to surround me. That's how she escalates. Not louder, but wider. If she couldn't beat the nurse, she'd outnumber her. I found out the way you find out anything in a family with a group chat. Della screenshotted it for me. There was a family thread I'd been quietly muted on for years. Not removed, just muted the way they do. And in it, all spring, Tansy had been laying track. Worried about Grandma, her memory's getting bad. Eira controls everything, won't let us see the accounts. We just want the cabin to stay in the family before it's too late. A drip, a drip, a drip. Every message reasonable on its own, the whole stream poisoned. Aunts I hadn't spoken to in months were replying with hearts and praying hands. One cousin wrote, "Poor Tansy, doing all the worrying while you-know-who plays gatekeeper." You-know-who? Me, the gatekeeper, for paying the taxes and answering the phone. I want to tell you it didn't get to me. It got to me. There is a specific loneliness in watching your own family agree, in writing, that you're the problem, when you're the one who's been showing up. For about a week, I had to fight the urge to dump everything into that chat. The locks, the power of attorney stunt, the $4,000 Cancun, the trust. Set the record straight. Win the thread. I didn't, because Grandma had taught me the cost of fighting on the enemy's ground. A group chat is Tansy's arena. Fast, emotional, no proof required. Won by whoever cries loudest. The folder was mine. So I stayed muted. I let them think the gatekeeper had no answer. I let the track get laid all the way to Father's Day because I knew exactly which station that train was pulling into, and it wasn't the one Tansy thought. The hardest part was Della begging me to defend myself. "They're going to show up to that party already hating you," she said. "You're letting them write the story." "Let them write it," I told her. "I've read the ending." So that's how, on Father's Day morning, with the porch boards warm under the sun and the lake flat as a held breath, I came to be sitting on my grandmother's couch in town, helping her into her good cardigan, knowing that the lawyer was already an hour up the road behind us, the folder on the seat beside him, and knowing, too, that in that same folder, behind the trust, sat a dated, notarized report proving the one thing my sister most needed to be false. While I buttoned her cardigan, Grandma reached into the drawer of her side table and took out a thing I hadn't seen in years. A flat brass dock key, worn smooth, on a leather fob my grandfather had tooled himself. The letters WHITCOMB pressed into it crooked because he'd done it by hand at the kitchen table in 1971. Your grandfather's key. she said, pressing it into my palm and closing my fingers over it. The original, before the brass deadbolts and the bubble handwriting notes. She held my hand shut a moment. He used to say a key isn't about keeping people out, it's about deciding who you hand it to. He handed it to me. I'm handing it to you, not the cabin. Anybody can be given a cabin and lose it. The deciding. That's the part that's yours now. I put that key in my pocket and felt the weight of it the whole drive out, a small warm shape against my leg. Hold on to it too. That key comes back at the end of all this, and it isn't the cabin and it isn't the trust. It's the thing my grandfather understood that my father never could. That love isn't rationing the firewood. It's deciding freely who you trust to keep the fire. What I didn't know yet was how bad it was about to get before it got better, because my sister, it turned out, hadn't waited for Father's Day at all. We drove out to the lake a little before noon, Grandma and me, with the windows down and the radio low. She was in a strange, light mood, humming, watching the corn go by. I asked if she was nervous. She said, "I've been waiting 3 years to watch this. I'm not nervous. I'm hungry." We turned onto the gravel road and I felt my stomach drop because the yard was already full of cars. The leased SUV, my father's truck, Royce's friends' trucks, a folding table and coolers operation in full swing, and taped to the porch post, a banner, hand-lettered in my sister's bubbly hand. It said, "Welcome to the lake house, the new chapter." The new chapter, like the old chapters, the 86 years of them, the grandfather who built the dock, the granddaughter who paid the taxes, were a book she'd decided to close. I helped Grandma up the steps. The crowd went quiet the way a crowd does when the one person who can ruin the surprise arrives. Tansy came toward us with her arms wide, beautiful, beaming, in a white sundress, holding that paper plate of barbecue. She hugged Grandma carefully, the way you hug something you've already inherited. "Grandma, you made it! Sit, I saved you the good chair." The good chair was Grandpa's chair, the cedar Adirondack he'd built, the one nobody sat in. They dragged it out and put a cushion on it and made it a throne for the ceremony. I watched my grandmother look at her dead husband's chair turned into a prop, and I watched her smile and say, "How thoughtful. Chang Jiao Chang Ken Gon." I'll just say it. They sat her in his chair. They put a plate in her lap. And then my father stood up and tapped his beer bottle with a fork, and the yard went quiet, and I understood the ambush was beginning a full hour before Royce had said it would, before Mr. Ardley's car could possibly arrive. "Everybody," my father said, "we got a little family business to take care of. Happy occasion. Tansy?" My sister set down her plate. She pulled a manila folder out from behind the cooler. They'd had it ready, staged, waiting. And she crossed to Grandma's chair and knelt down in the grass in her white dress. All tenderness, all love. "Grandma," she said, loud enough for everyone, "you've worked so hard your whole life. You shouldn't have to worry about this old place anymore. Let me take care of it for you. For all of us. Just sign right here, and you never have to think about taxes or repairs or any of it again." She held out a pen. "I'll do it all." It was a good performance. I'll give her that. Half the yard was misty-eyed. Royce had his phone up, filming the touching moment. My father was nodding like a man watching a debt get paid. And my grandmother, 86, in her dead husband's chair, with 30 pairs of eyes on her, looked down at the pen and the paper, and for one long second I thought she might actually do it. Not because she was fooled, because she was tired and old and being loved at hard in public. I took one step forward, and my grandmother lifted one finger off the armrest, just one, and I stopped. The finger meant wait. So I waited. Grandma took the pen. The yard held its breath, and she said in a clear, carrying voice, "Tansy, honey, before I sign anybody's anything, tell everybody here who's been paying for this cabin." Silence, the lake flat held breath kind. Tansy's smile didn't move, but something behind it did. "We've all pitched in over the years, Grandma." "Have we?" Grandma turned the pen over in her fingers. "Eira, how many years have you paid the taxes on this place?" I didn't want to say it. She knew I didn't want to say it. That was exactly why she made me. 9, I said. 9 years, Grandma repeated to the yard. "And Tansy, how many have you paid?" My sister's jaw worked. Royce lowered his phone an inch. That's not. Money isn't the only way to be part of a family, Grandma. I'm here. I'm present. Eira just writes checks. And there it was. The daisy cutter. The line I will hear in my head until I die. My sister, kneeling in the grass in her white dress, looked up at me and said it to the whole yard. Eira just writes checks. She doesn't really love this place. She loves being thanked for it. I'd love to tell you it didn't land. It landed. 9 years of January parking lots, of double shifts to cover a penalty, of a dockboard riding around in my trunk, and the verdict from the family pulpit was that I loved being thanked. I felt the heat climb my neck. I felt 30 faces turn to see how the check writer would take it. I took it the way I take everything. I smiled and I said, "Congratulations, Tansy. I hope you'll be very happy here." And I meant it in the way you mean a thing when there's a lawyer an hour up the gravel road with a folder on his seat. That should have been the moment it turned. It wasn't. It got worse first. Because my father, emboldened, decided this was the moment to settle the whole account. Not just to the cabin, but me. He set down his beer. He looked at me across the yard, across 30 witnesses, across 34 years, and he said the thing he'd clearly been saving. "You want to know your problem, Eira? You keep score. Your whole life. Every dollar, every favor, you keep a little ledger. Your sister gives this family her heart. You give us an invoice. That's why the cabin should be hers. She belongs to this place. You just bill it. You keep score." From the man who'd been keeping a 34-year score with exactly 2 columns and had put me in the losing one before I could talk. I did not say that. I want you to know I thought it, clear as a bell, and I did not say it. Some accounts you don't settle out loud. You let a folder do it. Tansy stood up out of the grass, brushing off her dress, victorious. She took the unsigned quitclaim deed and the pen, and she walked them back to Grandma's chair, gentler now, the hard part apparently over, just the formality left. "Okay, Grandma, whenever you're ready, right on that line." "And my grandmother, and I swear to you I will love her for this until the lake dries up." My grandmother looked at the pen, looked at the line, and set them both down in her lap. "I think," she said, "we should wait for the lawyer." Tansy laughed. "What lawyer, Grandma?" That's when the gravel crunched. A plain sedan, dust in the sun, turning into the crowded yard. The car door opened and a gray-suited man got out with a leather folder under his arm and walked toward the porch, and the whole new chapter went very, very quiet. Mr. Ardley climbed the porch steps without hurrying. He's a courtly man, soft-spoken, the kind of lawyer who looks like he'd apologize for a sunset. He nodded to my grandmother. He nodded to me. Then he turned to the yard full of confused, sunburned people, and he opened his folder. Good afternoon. My name is David Ardley. I'm Mrs. Whitcomb's attorney. I understand there's a document being discussed today regarding this property." He looked mildly at the quitclaim deed in Tansy's hand. "May I see it?" Tansy didn't want to give it to him. You could see it, but 30 people were watching, and refusing a polite old lawyer in front of 30 people looks like exactly what it is. She handed it over. Mr. Ardley read it. It took maybe 20 seconds. Then he set it down on the porch rail, very gently, the way you set down something that isn't going to matter anymore, and he asked his question. The one I told you about at the very beginning, the one that emptied the smile off my sister's face. "Before anyone signs anything," he said, "I think we need to discuss who has actually held title to this cabin since October of 2019, and who has been its trustee." Royce said, "It's what?" "Its trustee," Mr. Ardley said. "This cabin has not been owned by Opal Whitcomb personally for over 3 years. In October of 2019, Mrs. Whitcomb placed it into a living trust, the Opal Whitcomb Family Trust. The trust owns the cabin. Mrs. Whitcomb is its beneficiary for life. And the trustee, the person with legal authority over this property, the person whose signature is required to do anything at all with it, is named in the trust document." He paused. He looked kindly at my sister. "It is not you. I have replayed the next 10 seconds more than any 10 seconds of my life. The way the word trustee moved through that yard. The way Royce stopped filming and started very quietly to put his phone in his pocket. The way my father's face went from triumph to confusion to the specific gray color of a man recalculating 30 years of arithmetic. And the way the witnesses turned, one at a time. That's the part nobody tells you about a public reveal. It doesn't land all at once. It lands in a wave, person by person, as each one does the math. The first to turn was my cousin Della. She'd been standing by the cooler, arms crossed, and when Mr. Ardley said it is not you, she let out a single sharp laugh. Not cruel, just stunned, the laugh of someone watching a card flip. "Wait," she said loud, to the whole yard. "So this whole time, while she was changing the locks, Eira already legally ran the place?" She turned to the sunburned crowd. "Tansy locked the trustee out of her own trust, with a deadbolt, from the hardware store." Said plainly like that, in front of everyone, it sounded as absurd as it was, and I watched a few of Royce's friends start to grin at the cooler. The second to turn was Royce himself. "He's not a cruel man, Royce. He's a weak one, which is different. He'd married into a plan and gotten drunk enough at a 4th of July to brag about it, and now he was standing in a yard watching the plan dissolve, and you could see the exact moment he decided he wanted no part of what came next. He took one step back from Tansy. Just one. But in a yard that was reading body language like scripture, one step from the husband was a verdict. The third to turn was old Mr. Bellwether from the next cabin over, who'd wandered up for the free barbecue and had known my grandfather 40 years. He cleared his throat and said, to no one in particular, Opal always did say the quiet one had her grandfather's head for keeping things. And he looked at me when he said it and tipped his beer, and that small, ordinary courtesy from a man who'd buried a friend out here meant more than any document on the porch rail. And Tansy. My sister stood there in her white dress with the deed gone limp in her hand, and she said the only thing she could think of, which was, that can't be right. Grandma, what is he talking about? My grandmother folded her hands in her dead husband's chair. I'm talking, honey, about the wall I built 3 years ago. The one I told nobody but the one person I trusted to take care of it. You want to know who that is? She looked at me, and the whole yard followed her eyes, and for the first time in 34 years, I watched my entire family look at me as if I were the most important person standing there. It's Eira, Grandma said. Eira is the trustee. Eira has been the trustee since before you came home with your leased car and your sad stories. That cabin has been in her hands, legally, the whole time you've been planning to take it. And do you want to know the funny part? Her dry door hinge laugh. The quitclaim deed you brought today, even if I'd signed it, would have done nothing. You can't give away a thing you don't own. I haven't owned this cabin since the year before you remembered my phone number. I want to tell you Tansy crumbled. She didn't, not yet. Cornered people don't crumble, they swing. This is insane, she said, standing up, the white dress no longer tender. She manipulated you. Eira got to you when you were vulnerable. She's been planning this for years. She made you sign your own house away to her. Mrs. Whitcomb signed nothing away to your sister, Mr. Ardley said, still mild, still courtly. A trustee is not an owner. Eira does not own this cabin. She cannot sell it, cannot live in it, cannot profit from it. She is legally obligated to manage it for the benefit of one person, your grandmother. And after that, according to your grandmother's wishes. She is, in fact, the one person in this family who is legally forbidden from taking it for herself. He looked at me, the smallest smile. I'd imagine that's exactly why Mrs. Whitcomb chose her. The yard went very quiet then, and into that quiet my grandmother dropped the thing she'd been holding for 2 years. And while we're being honest in front of everyone, she said, since my granddaughter wants to talk about who really loves this place, Tansy, tell them about the $4,000. I watched my sister's face. I don't know what you mean. The $4,000 I wired you, for the truck that was getting repossessed, the week before Cancun. Grandma's voice didn't rise. It never rises. I saw the pictures, honey, the ocean, the little umbrella drink. Treat yourself. She let that sit. I never asked for it back. I just stopped trusting you with anything that mattered. And then I built the wall, so no. I didn't sign over my cabin to a girl who turned my emergency money into a vacation. I gave it to the girl who's been quietly paying its taxes for 9 years and never once sent me a bill she'd every right to send. That's when my father sat down, hard, in a folding chair that wasn't quite under him, so he half fell into it. I think it was the bill line that did it. Never once sent me a bill she'd every right to send, because he'd stood up not 10 minutes earlier and told 30 people that all I did was send invoices. And here was the woman who'd known the whole truth the whole time, saying the opposite in front of everyone whose opinion he'd spent his life performing for. If you've ever been the one who paid and got called selfish for noticing, if you've ever been told you keep score by the people keeping the realest score of all, drop one word in the comments: Trustee. I want to see how many of us are out here. Then stay with me, because what my sister did next is the part nobody saw coming. I thought it was over. It was not over. Cornered people swing, and then, when swinging fails, they bargain. And my sister is very, very good at bargaining. She knelt back down in the grass, back into the tender posture, back into the white dress softness, but this time facing me. Tears now, real-looking ones, the kind she's been able to produce since she was 7 and wanted my dessert. Eira, sis. Okay, you're the trustee. That's actually great, honestly. That's smart. Grandma was smart. So here's what we do. We're family. You keep the title, the legal stuff, all of it, and Royce and I just live out here. We'll keep it up. We'll pay the taxes from now on. You won't have to do anything. Trustee just means you sign off, right? You sign off and we live our lives. Everybody wins. It was, I'll admit, almost elegant. She'd lost the cabin in 10 seconds and was already trying to reacquire it through me, through the one lever she had left. My lifelong inability to be the bad guy in front of an audience. Sign off and we live our lives. She wanted me to use my legal authority to hand her exactly what the trust had stopped her from taking. And for one breath, the old reflex rose up. The reflex that has spent 34 years saying yes to Tansy so the table would stay quiet. I felt it. I want to be honest that I felt it. Then I thought about the dock board, the one that rode around in my trunk for a month because I'd been patient on purpose. And I thought about something Mr. Ardley had said, that I was legally obligated to manage the cabin for my grandmother's benefit, and after that, according to her wishes. Not Tansy's, not mine, hers. So I knelt down too, so we were eye to eye in the grass, and I said the calmest, hardest thing I have ever said to my sister. No, just that, first, then, I'm the trustee, Tansy. That means I work for Grandma, not for you. And Grandma's wishes are written down in that folder, in her own words, notarized. I've read them. You haven't. You want to know what they say? She didn't answer. Mr. Ardley did quietly from the porch rail. The trust provides that upon Mrs. Whitcomb's passing, the cabin is to remain in trust as a shared family property with use rights to all grandchildren in good standing, and that any grandchild who attempts to claim sole ownership, encumber the property, or transfer it out of the trust forfeits their use rights entirely. He let that land. Mrs. Whitcomb anticipated this exact day. She wrote it in. I'd advise everyone here that the document you brought today, the attempt to transfer the cabin out of the trust, is precisely the act that triggers forfeiture. I watched it hit my sister. Not the loss of the cabin. She'd already lost that. The other thing. That by trying to take all of it, she'd lost even her share. That Grandma had built a wall so quiet and so patient that the only way to set off its alarm was to do exactly what Tansy had just done, in a white dress, in front of everyone, on a banner that said, New Chapter. You set me up, Tansy whispered, to Grandma, to me, to the folder. No, honey, Grandma said. I set a rule. You're the one who ran into it. Here is the part I didn't expect, the part that still sits oddly in my chest. I didn't feel triumphant. I'd waited 3 years for this, patient on purpose, and when it finally came, I mostly felt tired and sad, and aware of how small the cabin actually is. 3 rooms, a tin roof, a dock that needs a board. We'd all been fighting over a brown building because none of us could fight over the thing we actually wanted, which was to be the one our father chose, which was to be loved without an invoice. Tansy and I, on our knees in the grass, were the same wound wearing two different dresses. I almost said that. I almost reached for her. And then Tansy stood up, wiped her face, and showed me one more time exactly who she was. "Fine," she said, her voice hard and flat now, the tears gone like a tap shut off. "Keep the cabin. Keep your little title. You've always wanted to be the one in charge, and now you are, and you can sit out here all alone with your taxes and your dock board, because that's all you've got, Eira. A cabin and a checkbook. Royce. We're leaving." And there it was. The second swing, the one designed to leave a mark on the way out, because if she couldn't have the cabin, she'd at least take a piece of me. A cabin and a checkbook. That's all you've got. She turned to go. And my grandmother, 86 years old, in her dead husband's cedar chair, said the last word of the whole long war in the calmest voice in the yard. "Tansy." My sister stopped. "You had use rights," Grandma said. "A key to this place for the rest of your life, same as everyone. A chair at every Thanksgiving out here. Your kids, if you have them, swimming off that dock. That was yours, free, forever, and all you had to do was not try to steal the whole thing." She picked up the quitclaim deed off the porch rail and held it out, the way you'd hand someone their coat. "This is what you traded it for, a piece of paper that was never going to work. Take it. It's the only thing here that's actually yours now." Tansy didn't take the paper. She walked to the leased SUV with Royce trailing behind, and they drove off down the gravel road in a cloud of dust, past the corn, past the "Welcome to the Lake House" banner that nobody had taken down, and I stood on my grandmother's porch and watched my sister leave the cabin she'd tried to inherit by ambush, with nothing, having forfeited even the share she'd been freely given. The yard slowly emptied after that. Royce's friends gathered their coolers with the sheepish quiet of people who'd come for a party and watched a funeral. The aunts came to me first, the ones from the group chat, the hearts, the praying hands, the poor Tansy. They came one at a time, the way the guilty always do, and they each found a version of the same sentence. "We didn't know." She made it sound so different. "If we'd known you'd been the one paying all along." My Aunt Carol actually reached for my hand and said, "You should have said something, Eira." And there it was, the oldest trick in my family, dressed up as an apology, making it my fault for staying quiet while they believed the loudest voice in the room. I didn't take the bait. I just said, "You had the same 9 years of information I did. You watched me write the checks too." And I let that land, gently, and watched my Aunt Carol understand that she hadn't been lied to so much as she'd preferred the story that asked less of her. Then I excused myself because there was someone harder waiting, and I'd run out of room in my chest for anybody's after-the-fact regret. Because in the thinning crowd, I finally turned to the person I hadn't dealt with yet, the harder one, my father. He was still in the folding chair he'd half fallen into, 71 years old, sunburned, holding a beer he'd stopped drinking. He wouldn't look at me. He looked at the lake. I want to tell you something true about that moment, because it's the part people skip. The villain who hurt me most wasn't my sister. Tansy was loud and obvious. You could see her coming. My father was the quiet architect. He'd spent 34 years teaching Tansy she was the one who belonged, and teaching me I was the one who'd understand. And he'd done it not out of cruelty, but out of a kind of cowardice that looks, from the outside, exactly like cruelty. He'd chosen her so he wouldn't have to feel the thing he felt when he looked at me, which was, I think, the wife who left. I sat down in the folding chair next to him. I didn't say anything for a while. The lake did its lake thing, flat and patient. "You really had it all along," he finally said. 3 years. 3 years. And you never said. Not when I called you selfish. Not when Tansy changed the locks. Not at any of those dinners where we— He stopped. He'd been about to describe what they'd done at those dinners, and hearing it out loud was too much. "Why didn't you just tell us?" And here is the thing I'd figured out, sitting in county parking lots, riding around with a dock board in my trunk. "Because if I'd told you, Dad, it would have been a fight. You and Tansy against me, lawyers contesting, the whole thing, exactly what Grandma didn't want. So I did what I've always done in this family. I looked at him. I kept the peace and paid the bill. The only difference today is somebody finally said out loud who'd been paying it. He flinched at that. Good. Some things should be flinched at. He was quiet a long time. Then he said the closest thing to an apology I have ever gotten from Garrett Whitcomb, which was not an apology at all, but I knew how to read it. Your grandmother always said you were the steady one. He turned the beer in his hands. I never knew how to do anything with steady. Tansy needed so much. You never needed anything. He shrugged, a small broken motion. I guess I figured the one who doesn't need you doesn't mind. The one who doesn't need you doesn't mind. As if not needing him meant not wanting him. As if the daughter who paid the taxes and fixed the dock and drove her grandmother to the lake had been doing it because she didn't mind being invisible, instead of because she was hoping, every single January, that this would be the year he noticed. Dad, I said, 2 weeks ago you stood in this same yard and told 30 people I keep a ledger, that all I do is bill this family. I let it sit. You want to know the only ledger I ever kept? It was the one where I waited for you to put my name in the column you kept Tansy in. I never wrote it down. I just carried it. 9 Januaries, 34 years. And you called that an invoice. He didn't answer. There wasn't an answer. A man who spent his life keeping 2 columns can't suddenly read a third. I could have made him sit in it. I had the high ground and a yard full of witnesses to my grandmother's wall. I could have read him my own ledger, line by line, the way he'd read me his. But here's what the trust taught me, what 3 patient years taught me. You don't have to swing back. Sometimes the steadiest thing you can do is set the board down. I minded, Dad, I said. That was all. I always minded. And I left it there because that's the boundary. Not a punishment, not a speech, just the true thing said once, plainly. And then no more reaching for a man who'd spent his life teaching himself not to be reached. I thought the porch had been the end of it. It wasn't. Tansy doesn't lose quietly, and 3 weeks later, a certified letter showed up at my door, and I learned the loudest part of the war was still ahead. The letter was from a lawyer, a real one this time, with a downtown address and a retainer she and Royce somehow scraped together. A notice of intent to contest the Opal Whitcomb family trust. The grounds. Undue influence. Their claim, in cold legal language, was that I, the quiet nurse, the trustee, had isolated a vulnerable old woman, turned her against her own family, and manipulated her into a trust that conveniently put me in control. They wanted the trust voided. They wanted Grandma declared incompetent at the time she signed. They wanted, in short, to burn the wall down and salt the ground it stood on. I read that letter 3 times standing in my kitchen, and I'll be honest, this is the moment I almost lost it. The porch I'd been ready for. This I had not. A lawsuit doesn't care what's true. It cares what you can prove and what you can outspend and how much ugliness you can survive. Tansy's lawyer didn't have to win. He just had to make it cost so much, money, grief, an 86-year-old woman dragged through depositions, that I'd settle. That I'd hand my sister a piece of the cabin just to make it stop. For about a day, I thought it might work. I pictured Grandma in a deposition. I pictured her name in a court file, the thing she'd built so quietly torn open in public by the exact person she'd built it against. I sat in my car in another parking lot, a courthouse one this time, and for the first time in the whole long fight, I felt like I might actually lose. Then I called Mr. Ardley. He listened to all of it, quiet, and then he said, Eira, do you remember what your grandmother insisted on 2 days before that party? The competency evaluation, Dr. Halverson, dated, signed, notarized, on Grandma's own terms, on the record, months before any lawsuit existed. Your sister's claim is that your grandmother was incompetent and unduly influenced, he said. Your grandmother had herself evaluated by an independent physician of 15 years standing, who documented full competency on a date that precedes this lawsuit by months, and your sister has her own paper trail. She told a care facility your grandmother's mind was slipping to try for power of attorney. That's the opposite of what she now has to argue in court. She can't claim your grandmother was sharp enough to mistreat in June and foggy enough to deceive in October. The dates won't let her." He paused. "Your grandmother didn't just build a wall. She built it knowing someone would come at it someday with a lawyer. That evaluation isn't a brick. It's the foundation." I sat in that courthouse parking lot and I started, very quietly, to laugh. The same dry door hinge laugh I'd inherited from the old woman who'd been 3 steps ahead of this family for 3 years. Their false victory had lasted 10 seconds on the porch. My false defeat lasted 1 bad day in a kitchen. But the wall held. It was built to hold exactly this. Tansy's lawyer withdrew the contest within a month, once Mr. Ardley sent the evaluation, the facility's records, and a very short letter describing what a counterclaim for elder financial abuse would look like. No settlement, no piece of the cabin, just a wall, holding, the way an old woman had quietly promised it would over weak coffee and lemon cookies. It took me weeks after that to understand what actually changed that Father's Day, and it wasn't the cabin. The cabin's fine. It's still in the trust, still 3 rooms and a tin roof, still mine to take care of and no one's to take. Della and I went out the next weekend and put in the dock board, the one that had ridden in my trunk for a month, finally going where it was always meant to go. We changed the locks back. I took the shiny brass deadbolt off myself with a screwdriver and put the old lock back on. The one my grandfather's worn brass key still turns, the one everyone in good standing gets a copy of. When I slid that crooked lettered key into the lock and felt the old tumblers give, something in my chest gave too. He handed it to me. I handed it to the people who'd earned it. That's the deciding. That's the part that was mine. We took down the new chapter banner and burned it in the fire pit, and Grandma, who came out for the afternoon, watched it go up and said, "There, now it's just the lake again." Tansy and Royce moved back out of state by August. She forfeited her use rights, exactly as the trust said. Mr. Ardley sent the letter, courteous and final. My father got his key. He's still in good standing technically, but he hasn't been out to the lake since. I think the cabin has too many witnesses in it now. I think he can't sit in it without hearing the word trustee and his own voice saying you keep score. He calls me sometimes. We talk about nothing. It is not a healed relationship. It is an honest one, which is a thing I'd stopped believing I'd ever get from him, and I've decided that an honest nothing is better than a loving lie. That's a boundary too, letting it be exactly as much as it is and not 1 ounce more. Here's what I keep coming back to, the thing I'd want you to take out to your own lake, your own table, your own family, with its own quiet ledgers. For 9 years, I thought my job was to keep paying, to keep fixing the dock, to keep being so reliable that one day they'd finally see it and choose me. I thought love was a bill I could pay my way out of being invisible. It isn't. My grandmother knew that. That's why she didn't reward me with the cabin. A trustee owns nothing, remember. She gave me a duty, not a prize. What she actually gave me, sitting at that little table with the lemon cookies in 2019, was the one thing nobody in my family had ever given me. She looked at the quiet one, the one who didn't need anything, and she said, "I see you, and I trust you, and I'm building you a wall. You don't have to keep paying to be seen. You don't have to win the cabin. Sometimes the whole victory is somebody finally saying your name out loud in front of the people who'd worked so hard to forget it, and you, standing there steady knowing it was true the whole time. If this story reached something in you, if you've got a brown cabin or a divided family or a January bill nobody else will write, do one thing for yourself this week. Say the true thing once, plainly to the person who needs to hear it. You don't have to fight at the table. You just have to stop pretending you don't mind. And if someone you know has been the steady one, the one who pays and gets called selfish for it, send them this. Let them know somebody out here sees it. Thank you for sitting on the porch with me. I'll see you at the next lake.